The town was quiet most days, a place where everyone knew each other and life moved at its own slow rhythm. On the edge of the street stood a small garage. The mechanic who worked there spent his days fixing broken engines, changing tires, and keeping old cars alive. His hands were always covered with grease, and his clothes often smelled of oil, but his heart was pure. People respected him not only because he was good at his work, but because he was always ready to help anyone who walked in with a problem. Every afternoon, when the sun dipped low, children from the neighborhood played outside on the road near his garage. Their laughter carried through the air like music, and the mechanic often paused his work just to listen. It reminded him of his own childhood when happiness came so easily. Among those children, there was one little girl who never joined in. She would watch from her wheelchair, clapping for others, smiling whenever they called her name, but deep down, everyone could see the longing in her eyes. She wanted to be part of the games, to run and laugh like the rest, but her legs would not allow her to. The mechanic noticed her often. Sometimes, as he wiped sweat from his forehead and leaned against the garage door, his eyes would drift toward her. She was young, with an innocent face that carried both joy and quiet sadness. No matter how happy she tried to appear, he could see that the happiness was incomplete. One evening, as her mother wheeled her past the garage, he greeted them. They stopped to exchange a few words, and in that brief conversation, he came to know about the girl's life. She had been unable to walk since birth, and her days were spent mostly at home, except when her mother brought her out to watch the other children. The story touched him deeply. That night, after he closed the garage, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the girl's eyes, the way they lit up when she watched the children, and the way they dimmed when she realized she couldn't join. He stared at the tools lying on his workbench, the pile of scrap parts stacked in the corner, and an idea began to grow in his mind. He had built cars all his life, but what if he built something special, something just for her? Not a car for the road, not a machine for adults, but a small car that could bring her joy. A car that would allow her to feel the wind on her face, even if only in her own street. The thought filled him with excitement. He sat down with a pencil and a piece of paper, sketching rough designs. It didn't have to be fancy. It just had to work. It had to be safe and easy enough for her to control. He imagined her hands holding the wheel, her face glowing with pride as she moved forward on her own. He pictured her laughter echoing among the other children, not as a bystander this time, but as one of them. That picture gave him energy, and he decided then and there that he would make it happen. The next day, he started collecting parts. He used whatever scraps he could find from the garage, an old frame, some wheels from a broken cart, a small engine that had been sitting unused. His neighbors wondered what he was up to, but he kept it to himself. This was not for money or fame. It was for one child who deserved a chance to feel included. Whenever customers left for the day and the town grew quiet, he would return to his secret project, working late into the night. The sound of his tools echoed in the stillness, each hammer strike and each turn of the wrench driven by love. It was not easy. Many times he ran into problems. The frame didn't fit, the engine was too heavy, the controls needed adjusting. But each time he thought about giving up, he remembered the girl's smile and pressed on. Days passed into weeks, and slowly, piece by piece, the shape of a little car began to appear in his garage. It was smaller than any car he had built, but to him, it was the most important one. He polished the body, painted it bright so it would shine in the sun, and carefully installed simple controls that her small hands could manage. Late one evening, when the final bolt was tightened, he stood back and looked at the finished work. The little car sat there, waiting, like a dream ready to come alive. The mechanic's heart swelled with pride and nervousness at the same time. Would she like it? Would she be able to use it? He didn't know for sure, but he believed that sometimes the effort itself mattered more than the outcome. He wasn't just giving her a car. He was giving her hope, a sense of freedom she had never known. That night, he couldn't sleep again, but this time it was different. He wasn't restless with worry, he was restless with excitement. Tomorrow he would invite the girl and her mother to the garage. Tomorrow he would see her reaction. The thought of her laughter was enough to keep him awake, smiling to himself in the darkness, knowing that life was about to change for one little girl, and maybe, in some way, for him too. The next morning, the mechanic woke up earlier than usual. The thought of the unfinished minicar had been on his mind all night. As the sun rose, he walked into his garage, rolled up his sleeves, and got straight to work. The half-finished car sat quietly in the corner, waiting for its final touches. He ran his hand over the frame, as though speaking silently to it, promising that soon it would bring joy to the child who needed it most. He worked carefully, adjusting every part so it would be safe and easy to control. He knew the girl's hands were small and her movements limited, so he modified the steering to be lighter. He used soft padding for the seat so she would feel comfortable, and he designed the pedals in a way that didn't require strong legs. Instead, he added simple hand controls, so she could move forward and stop with ease. Every detail mattered to him, not because he wanted the car to look perfect, but because he wanted it to fit perfectly for her. Days passed this way, with the mechanic spending long hours alone in the garage after finishing his regular work. The neighbors often saw him hunched over the little machine, sparks flying from his tools late into the night. Some people whispered, wondering what he was building, but he kept his secret. He wanted the surprise to be pure, a gift that would mean more, because it came without any expectation. The girl, meanwhile, had no idea what was being made for her. She still came by the street in her wheelchair, watching the other children laugh and play. Each time the mechanic saw her, it gave him new strength to keep going. He wanted that laughter to include her one day soon. The thought of her driving the little car and joining the fun pushed away every moment of tiredness. The more he worked, the more he realized how much love he was pouring into this project. It wasn't just about building a machine. It was about building confidence and freedom for someone who had always been left on the side. He thought about how the girl's mother would feel too, watching her daughter experience something she had never been able to before. Those thoughts made him careful, patient, and determined. One evening, as he tightened the last screw on the wheels, he leaned back and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The shape was complete. The little car stood there, painted in bright colors that shone even in the dim light of the garage. It wasn't big, but it was strong and safe. He smiled, thinking about how her small hands would grip the steering wheel, how her laughter would echo in the air when the car moved forward for the first time. Still, there were moments of doubt. He wondered if the girl would like it, or if she would even be able to use it comfortably. What if she was too shy? What if the other children laughed at her? These questions weighed heavily on him, but then he reminded himself that the car was built with love, and love always found a way to shine through fear. The mechanic decided to test the car himself before showing it. He climbed into the small seat, though it was much too small for him, and tried to move it forward. It worked. The little engine purred to life, and the wheels rolled smoothly. He laughed quietly, feeling like a child again. At that moment, he knew it would work for her too. It wasn't about perfection. It was about giving her a chance to feel the simple joy of moving on her own. Word began to spread in the town that the mechanic was working on something unusual. Curious neighbors started stopping by, asking questions, but he never gave away the secret. He only smiled and said, "You'll see soon." Deep down he was nervous, but he also knew the reveal would be worth it. That night, as he closed the garage door, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would invite the girl and her mother to see the car. Tomorrow would be the day she would finally sit in it. The anticipation filled him with both fear and hope, but he trusted that the joy in her eyes would answer every doubt. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining her smile, her laughter, the way her small hands would hold the steering wheel. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't just fixing machines. He was fixing something deeper, something in a child's heart. And so as the night grew quiet, the little car waited in the corner of the garage, shining with fresh paint and love, ready for the moment that would change both the girl's life and the mechanic's forever. The morning sun rose gently, and the mechanic felt his heart racing. Today was the day he had been waiting for. The little car sat in the middle of the garage, polished and shining, looking almost too perfect to touch. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and now all that was left was to share it with the one person it was meant for. He wiped his hands nervously on his work apron, though they were already clean, and stepped outside to call for the girl and her mother. When the mother wheeled her daughter toward the garage, the mechanic smiled warmly, though inside his chest felt heavy with nerves. He led them in without saying much, wanting the surprise to speak for itself. The girl's eyes darted curiously around the garage, wondering what she had been called for. Then the mechanic pulled away the cloth covering the car, and there it was, the brightly painted minicar, small enough for her, yet strong enough to carry her weight. The garage fell silent. The girl froze in shock, her little hands gripping the armrest of her wheelchair. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Her wide eyes filled with disbelief, and then slowly, tears began to form. Her mother gasped, covering her mouth as emotion swept over her. The mechanic felt his throat tighten as he softly said, "This is for you. I built it so you could have fun, just like the other children." The girl's lips trembled before she whispered, "For me?" Her voice was small, filled with both surprise and joy. The mechanic nodded, his own eyes wet now. With gentle hands, he helped her into the seat of the minicar. It was padded carefully, and the steering wheel was light enough for her to turn without effort. She looked around nervously, unsure, but the mechanic gave her a reassuring smile. "Go on," he said softly. "Try it." With shaky fingers, she pressed the control. The little engine hummed to life, and the car rolled forward slowly. Her eyes widened, and then it happened. Her lips curved into the brightest smile he had ever seen. She let out a laugh, pure and unrestrained, as the car moved across the garage floor. Her mother wiped away tears, watching her daughter do something she had never imagined possible. The sound of the engine and the girl's laughter drew people from the street. Neighbors peered inside, curious about the noise, and when they saw what was happening, their faces lit up with awe. Soon, children ran over, clapping and cheering for her. For the first time, she wasn't just sitting on the side. She was part of the joy, part of the play. She drove around carefully, giggling with every turn, and the other children circled her, excited to see their friend finally join them. The mechanic stood back, his hands crossed, his eyes misty. He had imagined this moment many times while building the car, but seeing it in reality was overwhelming. The garage, once filled with the smell of oil and tools clattering, was now filled with the sound of laughter, claps, and cheers. He realized then that this was not just a car. It was freedom for her. It was a dream that had taken shape out of love and determination. Her mother walked over to the mechanic and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't know what this means to us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You've given her something I thought she would never have." The mechanic, humble as always, simply shook his head and said, "I just wanted to see her happy." The girl continued driving around, her cheeks glowing red with excitement, her laughter spilling out into the street. More neighbors gathered, clapping and cheering, and some even recorded the heartwarming moment on their phones. It was as if the whole town had paused to witness the power of kindness. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the girl finally stopped the car, but her smile didn't fade. She looked at the mechanic with eyes full of gratitude, and in that look, he felt more rewarded than he ever had in his entire life. He had built countless cars before, but none had ever made him feel as fulfilled as this one did. That evening, when the garage grew quiet again, The mechanic sat on his workbench, replaying the day in his mind. The laughter, the cheers, the tears, it was all still fresh in his heart. He didn't know that the videos taken by the neighbors were already making their way online. He didn't know that soon, the story would travel far beyond the borders of his small town. All he knew in that moment was that a little girl had found her joy, and he had been lucky enough to be part of it. The story of the little car did not stay within the walls of the garage. By the next morning, people in the town were already talking about it. Neighbors who had witnessed the moment shared what they saw with friends, and soon the video clips taken on phones began spreading online. The mechanic had no idea that while he was busy repairing an old pickup truck, hundreds of strangers on the internet were watching the girl's laughter as she drove her mini car for the first time. In just a few days, the video traveled far beyond the town. It reached people in other cities and then other countries. Comments flooded in messages of love, encouragement, and admiration. People wrote about how the mechanic's simple act of kindness had restored their faith in humanity. They praised the little girl's smile, calling it a symbol of hope, and they admired the man who had taken time from his own life to bring her joy. At first, the mechanic didn't even realize what was happening. He wasn't active on social media, and he didn't care much for attention. But then people began stopping by his garage, not just to fix their cars, but to thank him. They told him they had seen the video, that it had touched their hearts. Some even came from nearby towns, just to shake his hand and tell him how much they respected what he had done. The mechanic felt a little overwhelmed. He had never wanted recognition. All he had wanted was to see the girl laugh, to give her something that made her feel free. Yet now he was being called a hero. Whenever someone praised him, he would smile humbly and say the same thing. "I only did what felt right." Meanwhile, the girl's life began to change too. For the first time, she wasn't just the child who sat on the side of the street watching others. Now she was the girl with the special car, the one who could join in, laugh, and play. Children who once pitied her now cheered for her, eager to take turns playing alongside her as she drove. Her mother, too, felt a weight lift from her heart. She had carried the sadness of watching her daughter left out for so long, and now, every time she saw that bright smile, her own eyes filled with tears of relief. The mechanic's garage, once a quiet corner for fixing cars, now became a place of inspiration. People would peek inside just to see the little car. Some parents came with their children, asking if he could build more. At first, he hesitated. He wasn't sure if he had the time or the money to make another one. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized this was bigger than just a single act of kindness. One evening, as he sat at his workbench, he read a letter that had been delivered to the garage. It was from a family in another city. They had seen the video and explained that their own child was also unable to walk. They wrote about how seeing the little girl's smile had given them hope, and they asked if he could build something similar for their child. The mechanic stared at the letter for a long time. He never imagined his work would touch lives beyond his small town. The attention only grew. Reporters began calling, asking for interviews. Local newspapers wanted to publish his story. At first, he avoided them, shy of the spotlight. But eventually, he agreed to speak, not because he wanted fame, but because he realized sharing his story might encourage others to show kindness too. When asked why he did it, his answer was always simple: because every child deserves to feel included. Every smile is worth the effort. As the days passed, the mechanic's act of kindness became a movement. People online started fundraising to support him, sending donations so he could buy more parts. Others offered to volunteer at the garage to help him build more mini cars for children who needed them. The story had grown into something far beyond his imagination. Yet, through all of this, the mechanic remained the same humble man. He still opened his garage each morning, still fixed broken engines, still worked late into the night. But now, there was something different in his heart. He felt a new sense of purpose, as if life had quietly handed him a mission he had never asked for, but was grateful to receive. And just when he thought the story had reached its peak, something even bigger was about to happen. One afternoon, as he tightened bolts on a customer's car, he heard the sound of a powerful engine approaching. He looked up to see a sleek black limousine slowing down in front of his garage. Curious neighbors stepped outside their homes, whispering and pointing. The mechanic wiped his hands on a rag, unaware that this unexpected arrival would change everything. The limousine stopped right in front of the mechanic's garage, its glossy black surface reflecting the curious faces of neighbors who had gathered nearby. The mechanic put down his tools and stood still, his heart beating a little faster. He wasn't used to such grand sights. For him, life had always been simple grease on his hands, tools on the bench, and engines humming in the background. Now, as the door of the limo opened slowly, he felt like he had stepped into a scene from someone else's life. Out stepped a man in a sharp suit, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. He carried himself with confidence, but his eyes held kindness. The crowd whispered in surprise, wondering who he was and why he had come to this quiet street. The suited man walked straight toward the mechanic, extending his hand with a smile. The mechanic hesitated, then shook it firmly, still unsure what this visit was about. "I've come because of you," the man said warmly. "And because of what you did for that little girl." His voice carried sincerity, and the mechanic could feel the weight of those words. The man introduced himself as a representative of a foundation that supported children with disabilities. He explained how their organization had seen the story online and how deeply it had touched them. "What you built wasn't just a car," he said. "It was hope. And that's something the world needs more of." The mechanic stood quietly, listening, still trying to believe that his small act of kindness had reached people far beyond his town. The man continued, saying the foundation wanted to support him. They wanted to provide funding, tools, and resources so he could build more mini-cars for children who needed them. They wanted to turn his single act of kindness into something that could help many families. The mechanic's eyes widened. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He had built that car only with love, never expecting anything in return. Now here was an opportunity to multiply that love, to spread it across places he had never even seen. His heart swelled, and his throat tightened as he looked at the suited man and whispered, "I never thought something so small could go so far." Just then, the little girl and her mother arrived. She was still glowing with happiness from the day before, eager to take another ride in her special car. When she saw the limousine and the suited man, she looked confused, but then the mechanic bent down and smiled at her. "It looks like your car has started something bigger than we imagined," he said softly. She giggled, not fully understanding, but her innocent joy lit up the moment even more. The neighbors clapped and cheered as the man from the foundation promised that this was only the beginning. He told the mechanic that soon, with their help, children in other towns and cities would also get their own mini-cars. The little garage that had once been known only for fixing old trucks and broken engines was now about to become a place of hope, a workshop where dreams could be built piece by piece. The mechanic looked around at the smiling faces, at the girl laughing as she sat once again in her mini-car, and at the mother whose eyes shone with gratitude. He felt humbled. He realized that sometimes the simplest acts born not from wealth or power but from compassion could ripple out into the world in ways no one could predict. That evening, after the limousine left and the crowd slowly dispersed, the mechanic sat quietly on his workbench. The garage was silent again, but his heart was louder than ever. He thought about how a pile of spare parts had turned into something that touched countless lives. He thought about how one child's smile had spread hope across the world. And he thought about how life had given him a new purpose without him even asking. As the night settled in, the little car sat gleaming under the soft light, no longer just a machine, but a symbol. It was proof that kindness never goes unnoticed, that giving without expecting anything back often brings the biggest blessings. The mechanic closed his eyes with a quiet smile, knowing the journey was only beginning. Tomorrow he would return to his garage, not just as a man who fixed cars, but as someone who built happiness, one child at a time.